Criminals feel safe to hide behind the internet. They hire people and train them to be effective salespeople with the goal of taking your money. Let's look at a few ways to do due diligence to be sure that who you are working with online are who they say they are. Today's guest is Ken Gamble. Ken is a professional investigator, corporate security specialist, and cybercrime expert with 33 years of experience working for individuals and multinational corporations. He's the co-founder and executive chairman of IFW Global that conducts fraud investigations, asset tracking, fraud recovery, disruption and prevention of global cybercrime, monitoring and enforcement actions to protect and recover assets for worldwide clients. He is the current Australian chairman of the International Association of Cybercrime Prevention, a non-profit association founded in Paris in 2006. Ken is an accomplished surveillance specialist and former surveillance advisor and contractor to a Commonwealth government agency in Australia and a consultant to numerous law enforcement agencies in the US, Asia, and Europe, as well as several foreign governments. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Ken Gamble, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So can you give myself and the audience a little background about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a private investigator, a veteran private investigator with 33 years of experience, mostly in Australia, but I have worked all over the world. I've lived in several different countries, including the United States. I started in 1988 as a surveillance operative working for a government insurance office out here, doing insurance fraud. I did surveillance work for probably 15 solid years for all sorts of organisations. And then I got into cybercrime. I started to take an interest in cybercrime. In fact, not all that long after the internet was kind of born, I started to get into cyber cases. And over the years, I developed an expertise in the area of cybercrime and started pursuing sort of large-scale cybercrime cases, whether it's hackers tracking their relocations, or finding out who's behind a website, that type of thing. So over the years, I built up several companies, and now running my own independent international firm called IFW Global, and we these days focusing very much on large-scale fraud. But I've done lots of cases over the years. I've gone into all the different realms of private investigation. I've rescued kidnapped children from foreign countries. I've worked in over 45 countries around the world, so a lot of my work in the past 20 years has been in foreign countries, whether it's Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, North Africa, all over Southeast Asia. I've worked extensively, more than 20 operations in China alone. So that was kind of my area of expertise, was working in foreign countries, doing operational stuff. I used to do a lot of corporate risk work for big multinationals and, protective security, bodyguarding, all of that type of work. But in the past 5 years, I've found my real space in the area of serious financial crime and cross-border large-scale financial crime, which is a massive criminal industry that's causing havoc around the world at the moment.
Was there a specific event that made you want to get more involved in the cybercrime and the international, financial crimes?
I think that I saw from a very early stage that there was this thing called the internet. There was, back in 95, we started working for Microsoft, investigating Windows 95 counterfeits. And we started realizing that the computer and the internet was going to attract so much crime. So I started taking a fascination in how people can hide behind websites and how you can set up a false facade online and be anybody. So I kind of, from a very early stage, was looking beyond how people do that. And one of my first huge cases was an AOL case. It was for AOL tracking down one of the world's largest spammers who was hiding in the Philippines. We ended up having him arrested.
Was that Wallace Sanford?
No, it was Matthew Bagley and okay. Chris Smith. Chris Smith got 30 years in prison. So these guys were running the biggest spamming of counterfeit drugs, actually.
Oh, wow.
Which is quite extraordinary, because flash forward to 2015 and I'm raiding a Pfizer, a counterfeit drug factory for Pfizer, which was a cover story on the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, wow.
So I saw this evolving crime starting to happen, and I saw at a very early stage this is a big business, and the lack of enforcement, no sort of enforcement for the internet at all. There was zero enforcement. This is the Wild West. You can do anything you want on the internet, and as the internet progressed and become more and more sophisticated, so did the crimes. But still, there's no watchdog. There's no global organisation that takes care of fraud on the internet. So, which led me to become one of the co-founders of Internet Fraud Watchdog in Europe in 2007, and that's how we started. I had this vision of privatising law enforcement on the internet. That was my vision when I was in the late 2000s. You know.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges that I think I've run across with trying to help people is, well, if the crime happened in the United States and both the criminal and the victim were both in the United States, okay, if you're lucky, there's legal systems that can help you. But as soon as it goes international, it's, well, now you've got to have domestic lawyers, international lawyers, international law enforcement has to get involved, and the complexities of pursuing stuff just go up exponentially. Absolutely,
and that's why the internet has been so successful as a platform for criminals, because the jurisdictional nightmare and you know, some of these groups that we're investigating are so sophisticated. You know, these are high-tech, state-of-the-art criminal organisations who are impossible to track by electronic means. So unless you can infiltrate their operations physically, which is going back to the old style detective work, you know, actually infiltrating them and getting inside their operations, that, you know, by recruiting people into their organisations and so forth. Unless you can do that, you're not going to actually be able to take their operations down. It's incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine that they're very decentralized, I assume, and they have people working for those organizations all over the world.
Yes, that's correct. And the technology that allows people to remain anonymous, you know, it's become a big business to allow people, and of course criminals take advantage of these types of applications and so forth, encryption, all that. You know, they're using this to anonymously hide themselves, and that becomes really difficult when it comes to investigating cyber crimes. And but it's not impossible, and there are ways and means still to catch people, because any cyber criminal has to interact with the victim in some way.
Yeah,
they have to leave some sort of footprint. And they're not all super sleuths. They're not all, you know, state of the art. Some of these groups still make mistakes. Surprisingly, some of these big organisations, they make mistakes because they have a lot of people working for them. Sometimes even the workers may forget to put their VPN on one day or something. So we find that we still get a lot of success by tracking these people down, but it's cross-border. It's cross-jurisdiction. The average scam group that we look at, particularly in the Southeast Asia region, like these what we call boiler rooms, the Wolf of Wall Street type offices that sell fake investments, the average scam uses 25 different jurisdictions.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is bank accounts in one, companies in another, IP in another, and so on and so on. The registry, the domains, all the intricate pieces of the crime are split out into 25 different jurisdictions around the world. So that makes it pretty complicated for any detective or any investigator in any part of the world to take on that case single-handedly.
So are most of the investigations that you do you have like an individual client, or is it usually like corporate clients who have lost money through, funds have been intercepted and, sent to a different account as opposed to their appropriate vendor?
No, we have both, but we certainly have a lot of individuals, normally individuals that have lost large amounts of money, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, because people that haven't lost a lot of money can't afford our services anyway. Mm-hmm. So we are more of a high-end firm where we would, we require significant retainers to go after these people. This is high-risk work, These criminals try to kill us if they could. These are dangerous criminals, some of the groups that we go after. So there is a degree of, funding that we need to catch these people. So we tend to only go after the larger cases where there's a greater chance of success.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of individuals come to us. We've had groups as big as 165 people come to us as part of a big class action. We often have funders come to us that might be funding a major fraud case. It could be a $100 million Ponzi scheme or something like that, and they will come and retain us as part of part of an investigation into a large scale fraud of some sort. We also have corporates come to us, even banks. We've had a bank just yesterday contact us in relation to a fraud against the bank, quite an unusual, bizarre type fraud that was all cyber. So we are getting contacted by many different organisations.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've worked for foreign governments. I've worked directly for some very high level government officials in foreign countries where we've been asked to come in and look at money laundering and cases where their government has no ability to investigate cross-border cases.
So it is, and if you don't want to disclose, hey, that's too behind the curtain, I don't want to disclose how we do stuff, is a lot of the success you've had in recovery by following the money or by following the interactions between the victim and the criminal?
No, it's actually neither. Because following the money only leads to bankers, and the way that this whole fraud industry is set up is that the money doesn't lead directly back to the criminals. It leads to money launderers, and those launderers will actually cash out the money, and they will transport it sometimes physically
mm-hmm.
to the mastermind. So the old days of following the money are gone. We have to use other methods, quite sophisticated methods in some cases, to track the whereabouts of some of these organisations. And also, there is a lot of electronic and cyber investigations that go on, a lot of tracking, using sophisticated tracking software and so forth, and also engaging with the criminals. So a lot of times the victim can re-engage with the fraudster and pretend that they want to send more money, and then we can track some of those conversations or emails and ascertain the jurisdiction. Now, because we've been doing it a long time, we also have a lot of informants. So it's not unusual for us to get information about a certain group that may be operating in a certain country, in a certain office building even.
Mm-hmm.
And we most of our major successes, some of the ones that have been on 60 Minutes and won awards. One of them won an award. Those cases have been uncovered through the use of whistleblowers and informants, actually people inside that have blown the whistle. And a majority of our successes have been as a result of whistleblowers, and that continues to happen to this day as people contact us. They may have been working for an organisation and they may be now disgruntled, and they want to blow the whistle on a criminal group. And it could take us 6 months to put the operation together, and then we're knocking down their door with a SWAT team.
So when you have an insider, contacting you, or that communication eventually gets to you, is it often that they're disgruntled, or do you find that there are people who they kind of went to work for the criminal organization, not realizing it was a criminal? They're working in a call center, thinking they're doing real tech support when they're really planting malware on machines.
Yes, that actually happens quite a lot. They discover once they're in these call centers that they're actually selling investments that don't exist. If they're selling investments, particularly stocks and shares, is the most profitable, because once they have a customer on the hook, he will throw hundreds of thousands of dollars at buying shares. So that's a big, it's a big earner for the criminals.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these people get sucked into it. And what happens is they go into a Southeast Asian country, they get their passport taken by the boss, and the boss will hold the passport as security to make sure that the guy does his job and so forth. But it's kind of a form of human trafficking, because these people get caught in these operations, and sometimes they're stuck for years, and they develop alcohol addictions and drug addictions, and they are kind of forced to work in this environment, and they don't like it. And eventually, some of these men, they're always men. This is a male-dominated industry. Don't think we've ever seen a female working in one of these boiler room operations in Southeast Asia, but it's actually mostly young men that have been lured into this sort of scene. And of course, it's the lure of riches and huge amounts of cash like they've never seen, which keeps them on the hook. But sometimes they will, the conscience will get the better of them, and they will come forward and give information anonymously. Sometimes that leads to us identifying who they really are because we develop a relationship. Mm-hmm. And some of these whistleblowers, we've even put them back inside the operation again to gather more information, this time for good instead of evil.
That's great. That, like, I always wondered, does anyone out there have a conscience? So it's neat to hear that at some point, some people in these organizations are going, "Oh, this is just so wrong. I've got to say something."
Absolutely, and a lot of the workers at the lower level are really struggling with their conscience when they're doing this type of work. Some of them don't care. There are a lot of people that are void of emotion, particularly the bosses that run these operations. This is a business. They don't get emotionally involved at all. These are true gangsters who are absolutely ruthless when it comes to what they will do to get money out of somebody, and they don't care. They don't care whether they have to harm someone in order to get someone to back off. I've had several hits put on me over the years. Some of them quite high profile, where they just see me as such a threat to their business because I've been able to get into their organisations. Mm-hmm. But these people all have a very common thread. These fraudsters, and they're just void of emotion. They're horrible people, and they've had horrible upbringings. As I said, drug and alcohol addictions. They are just ruthless. But on the phone, they sound really good. They have great voices. It could be a very posh British accent. They sound like they've just come out of a London, working for a London stock exchange or something. But these are well-spoken, polished speakers. But in reality, they're gangsters.
So for the kind of the entry level people that are recruited, are there kind of warning signs that that people that are looking, I don't want to say they're looking for the job to work for the criminal organization, but if they're looking for jobs, it's like, okay, this is clearly a red flag that this is a criminal organization and not a legitimate business?
No. The advertising, they advertise a lot on platforms such as Craigslist. And all they advertise is for telemarketers. We're looking for salespeople. So there's a lot of sales jobs on Craigslist. But in Southeast Asia, they use Craigslist a lot. Certain channels of Craigslist are known where the boiler room operations advertise, and they just put out adverts. Very attractive commissions, sales work, telemarketing. You have to be able to work from home, all the normal things that you would see in a job advertisement. Mm-hmm. But they certainly never announce that this is anything criminal. They will lure the people in to the job, and they will say, we are a financial brokerage firm. We're based in Hong Kong. We need telemarketers to work from home. You can work from anywhere at all. We're going to give you the lead sheets. You're going to ring up all day, every day, and you're going to read out a script, and you're going to sell these stocks and shares. And that's how it works. And then comes a point where the telemarketer comes to the realization, hey, this is not right. This is fraud, and these organisations are so bold. They're so kind of ruthless and bold. They just don't, they threaten the person with harm if they are to say anything. They threaten them. They threaten their lives sometimes. They're just horrible people.
It's kind of once the person realizes it's a criminal enterprise and they say something, it's, well, you better keep doing it because now you're part of the criminal enterprise.
Correct.
You're now at risk. If I'm going down, you're going down with me, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And they will say, we're the only ones that can protect you. And what they would say is that you're now working with us. You're with us. You're protected. We've got the chief of police on our payroll. That nothing is going to happen to us. If anything does, we will get you out of trouble. But if you abandon ship, you're on your own, and you could get in a lot of trouble. So they manipulate the minds of these young men that come out from Canada, the United States, the UK, and work in these operations. And Eastern Europe is filled with these types of operations. Bulgaria, Ukraine, Georgia, Albania, even South Africa. There are hundreds and hundreds of these call centers that are committing large-scale financial crime across the world.
And do you find that they actually, where they do have the in-person physical call centers, do they have local police on their payroll?
Absolutely. That's part of the business model. They set up in countries where they can manipulate law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
In Southeast Asia, the levels of corruption are unbelievable. The amount of corruption in Southeast Asia, in Southeast Asian countries, people on the payroll, very high-ranking law enforcement officials, government officials, intelligence officials. When it comes to money, these are financial crimes. These are crimes that are extremely profitable. This is what everyone wants, is the money. So it's a very easy type of crime to get an official to turn a blind eye, because nobody's getting hurt, nobody's getting murdered, nobody's physically harmed. This is just fraud, This is just cleaning out the finances of gullible investors around the world. So the way they sell it's almost like there is no harm that they're doing to the victim.
These are rich people from the United States who have so much money they don't know what to do with it. If they lost a few $100,000, it wouldn't impact their
Absolutely.
lives. They're still going to be able to feed their children. So there's really no harm happening.
Absolutely. And I've sat in prison cells in the Philippines face to face with British members of these gangs, and they've told me to my face, these investors are greedy. They deserve to lose their money. They keep coming back over and over again. They're so greedy that they just they just can't help themselves. So we take advantage of that, and we're more than happy to take their money.
So from the investor and the individual side and the target victim, what are the red flags that these people should be watching out for?
Well, the big red flag when you are dealing in say an investment of some sort is that you should never deal with somebody unless you can get on a video call with that person and talk to them face to face for a start, because all these criminals, all these cyber criminals, these fraudsters, they all hide behind the mask of being anonymous. That is the way that they are successful. So the way to circumvent that is, number one, ask for a video call. If they will not do a video call, if they will not show their face, do not do business with them of any sort. If they will say, oh, it's company policy, we're not allowed. Because of security reasons, we're not allowed to do a video call with you. Well, if that's the case, then you don't want to do business with any firm. Plus some due diligence. What is extraordinary, we've got clients who've lost tens of millions of dollars, but they haven't spent $1,000 doing some basic checks. The due diligence is non-existent. And that I think is the most extraordinary thing that I see on a regular basis is just a complete lack of due diligence, where they will believe what they see on a website and what they read in press releases, which have been published by the criminals themselves on self-publishing platforms.
Yep.
So they read material on the internet and they believe it. And once they believe it, and they believe that they're going to get a good deal on these shares, which are 25% lower than the retail price, and they're just going to throw money into it because they see this opportunity, which is an illusion. It's actually a trick, and they fall for it. So video calls, number one. Due diligence, just some basic due diligence.
What would you consider some of that basic due diligence?
Well, firstly, find out how long the company's been operating, doing a check on the domain to find out when it was registered, whether the registered domain is in the name of a company or a person, where is it registered, or has it been masked by a domain proxy provider, which is a red flag, as to why don't they want to know who owns the website. And also, where's the company domiciled? Where's the actual office? The very simple way to catch most of these scammers is to ask them where their office is based, where's it registered, where's the company registered, and who are the directors of the company, who is the managing director or the president of the company, where's it registered? Of course, they can't answer any of these questions because these companies are not registered, they're not real. So if they give you an office address, it will be fake. So you send someone to that address to do a physical check, and they're not there. Mm-hmm. So the questions are quite simple, and the answers are very easily verifiable because they're lying. So we catch them all the time. I'll tell you a very funny story. The other day, I said to one of my victims in the United Kingdom, he was getting these calls from this guy, and we had a feeling that this group that was calling him was from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They had Eastern European accents, and we know there's some really big operations in Ukraine. But he said he was calling from London, from an address in London. I said to him, tell the scammer that you've got special software in your phone that actually reveals the real location of what you're calling from. And he said to the guy on the phone, the scammer, he said, I've got this software that actually identifies your location, and this is telling me you're from Ukraine. And the guy said, well, yes, actually, I am, but our main office is in London, and we work from remote. So he actually admitted it. So the victim scammed him into because he's like caught thinking, what do I do? Do I, it was just a trick, of course, but he was in Ukraine. So they just lie. They have scripts. These people are highly trained on how to lie to get people's confidence. It's they have what they call rebuttals. They script this out. They learn it over and over 1,000 times, like an actor learning a Shakespearean play on Broadway. They know what to say, when to say it, how to say it. It's all rehearsed.
I mean, it's funny because in some sense, those are similar sort of the training that a legitimate organization that's selling a product or service will do. There's, okay, we're going to bring all these salespeople into the meeting, and we're going to have the overcoming objections meeting. Here are the top 10 objections.
Correct. It's all sales. It's sales. And these people are good. These criminals that work for these organizations are very, very clever. And these are some of the best salesmen on the planet. I mean, you've seen Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. These are Jordan Belfort trained. Some of these people do Jordan Belfort's courses. They are highly trained, highly trained salespeople who are there for one purpose, and that is to get you to give them money.
Yeah, I could totally see that. So what are are there any additional kind of things that someone should be watching out for? I think you talked about, the stock being 25%. If it's a stock offering, you can get it through us for like 25% off the IPO price.
Yeah, look, IPOs and the selling of stocks and shares is very, very common. That's a big scam. It's the most profitable because of the amounts of money involved. So it's quite easy to verify whether a company issues share certificates, for example. Now, some of these criminal organisations will offer share certificates to their customers. They purport to be a financial advisory firm, and they will offer financial share certificates, actual share certificates, whereas the company, whether it's a big public, Dropbox or one of the big American Airbnb shares or something like that, a lot of these companies do not issue share certificates anymore. So share certificates are often a thing of the past. So when they're issued share certificates, they can easily find out. They can go to companies that actually verify whether or not the share certificate exists or whether it's fake. So that's not a difficult thing to do. Or even contact the company themselves and ask them whether or not this financial advisory firm has a license to sell their shares. The number one red flag with these organisations, any scam organisation, is they're unregulated. If they're not regulated in a certain country, then that's a red flag not to do any business with them. The problem is that they will clone a regulated firm, and they will set up their name, and they will say that their name is EverFX or something, and they will clone a real firm, a real regulated firm, and so what they do is they they talk to the victim on the phone, and they say, "Oh, we're calling from this company," and they will send links on the email to the victim while they're talking to them, saying, "Look, you can click on here, you can see all of our reputation, you can see our FCA, a Financial Conduct Authority license here, you can see this and this," and the person's actually looking at all the real information, and then they will guide them to their website. After the person's done their due diligence, they will send them, an invitation to set up an account on their website, which has, an additional extension on the domain name, which is actually the cloned domain. And then they will start their trading with a company that's purely cloned. That's a very common practice that we're seeing now, particularly with these large-scale investment fraud trading platform type cases, the crypto platforms, crypto trading. You see these Bitcoin revolutions, Bitcoin era, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that. They're using all these sophisticated Bitcoin videos to rope people in to engaging on that platform.
Have you dealt with any fraudulent cryptocurrency exchanges as part of your investigations?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got several of them now that we're investigating in Eastern Europe, countries like Estonia. Some of these syndicates, a lot of them are tracing back to the Israeli binary options industry. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the binary options industry was making about $5 billion a year in fraud. It was outlawed in Israel in 2017, and binary options was probably one of the largest criminal incomes in the world for investment fraud. It was a massive, massive criminal industry, and the government itself announced publicly, the Israeli government announced that they had lost control of this monstrous criminal industry. So all these Israeli gangs that were operating have all left Israel now, and they've set up shop in South Africa, in Bulgaria, in Ukraine, in the Philippines, all these different countries. Cyprus is riddled with boiler rooms. And they've set up these operations. So now, they are they spread across the world essentially, and it's become almost like an epidemic.
Yeah, that's horrible. It just makes me think of like rats fleeing a sinking ship. They just go everywhere.
That's what's happened. They've actually left. A lot of them have left Israel. They're not all Israelis, but the industry is dominated by Israelis because they have the technology, they have the platforms. The whole industry is dominated by these Israeli crime groups that have this enormous ability to do digital marketing across the world. And these platforms are reaching. They're popping up on everyone's Facebook account all over the planet.
Yeah, it makes it hard for people to figure out what is legit, what is not legit. All these,
yeah, absolutely.
Particularly when it comes to like emerging technology and emerging, financial instruments.
Well, absolutely, and cryptocurrency is bringing all sorts of new challenges. Of course, Bitcoin is traceable on the blockchain, so it's not that Bitcoin can be transferred somewhere and it vanishes. The Bitcoin itself is on the blockchain. It's traceable all over the world, but it's the exit points that are difficult to trace where the money gets taken out. And quite often there are unregulated exchanges in places like Eastern Europe and some poorer countries where they will exchange Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But you see these fraudsters, the big ones, the big groups that I'm talking about, they're so sophisticated they don't need to use unregulated exchanges. They buy their own exchanges. They are so wealthy that they buy their own banks. They own banks in Indonesia. They are buying into the infrastructure. They own the VoIP companies. They own the telecommunications companies. They own some of these crypto exchanges in like countries like Estonia. We know that some of these criminal masterminds have put clean-skinned people into regulated exchanges in Estonia. Now, that's pretty dangerous stuff when you think about the fact that these are regulated, the money's going through, so that when we try to do law enforcement action or civil action or anything against the exchange, the masterminds are immediately tipped off, and the exchange will go to all sorts of efforts to muddy the waters so that we don't really find out who received the money.
Mm.
And so, this is what's happening in the world of cybercrime these days. It's becoming so sophisticated that the average government law enforcement agency is left in the dark.
Yeah, your local community law enforcement agency is not going to be able to help you out.
Not at all. I mean, the sophistication of these groups is it can't be overstated. These people fly around on their own private jumbo jets, and I'm serious. We are seeing people that are making hundreds of millions of dollars per year in profits, just profits. They are engaging in all sorts of other organised criminal activities, not just fraud. These are criminals. They're involved in criminal activity. They have their own agendas. They are linked to political causes. The waters are very muddied now when it comes between fraud, which law enforcement has traditionally classified as a low risk, low level type of offence. Mm-hmm. But now we see some of the biggest criminal groups in the world raising money through fraud because it's high profit and low risk. Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. It's a lot easier to steal $10 million from an investor than it is to make $10 million off of moving illicit drugs or weapons around the world.
Absolutely. And those old-fashioned crimes are still, they're still going on, but we are seeing, just such an enormous amount of criminal profits getting transferred around the world in a matter of seconds too, through crypto exchanges and so forth. And, some of these groups have mastered the art of how to launder the money just to countries that don't cooperate with each other as well. They will send it from, money will go from the United States to another unspecified country, one that I won't name, but countries where they just don't traditionally cooperate with the United States. Mm-hmm. So they do their research very well. And then they will go to a third country that doesn't cooperate with that country. So yeah, they actually play law enforcement, and it's like a game to them. Mm-hmm. They sit back and they have huge celebrations. They laugh at the incompetence of some of the governments that they're stealing money from these victims. It's almost a running joke within these organisations, and I know that because we have people inside some of these organisations feeding us information, and we know what is being said and how they see the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Have you had much luck? And we had talked a little bit about recovery, and you've had some large wins on recovery. What does that process look like, and what's the likelihood of getting a portion of funds back if they've been involved in something like this?
Well, if we can identify the offenders and we can prosecute them or unveil their identities, the chances of recovery then become quite significant because these criminals hide behind the fact that they're not identified. They don't want to be publicly known. They don't want to be revealed. So where I've found, I guess, a niche market in asset recovery is the ability to go and prosecute these people and have them arrested. Now, I've done a lot of operations in the Philippines over the years. I used to do counterfeit drugs investigations for companies like Pfizer. I used to do anti-piracy for organisations like the Motion Picture Association of America. So I did some very high-profile work over the years, and that got me warmed up and trained up into going after criminal fraudsters. And that was a whole new ballgame because these are more dangerous criminals, more ruthless, have more corrupt police on their payroll. It's a different level again. So I found myself going after these types of groups. Now, when we started arresting some of these people, we would find that they were desperately trying to sort of pay their way out of going to prison. Mm-hmm. And we so there was some settlements in some of my earlier cases 5-6 years ago when we kind of turned and focused on asset recovery. we got some incredible settlements. $2.2 million, $6 million in one case that we seized in a bank account. We found lots of other smaller recoveries. We found that if we identify the offenders and we actually can then freeze their bank accounts or freeze their assets, and we go after them with civil lawsuits and court orders and injunctions, it kind of really worries them. And the only way to get me to back off is to pay my client back. And I tell these guys to their face when we arrest them, we drag them away in handcuffs. If you want to get out of this mess, you need to pay the victim back the money. And that's what we're there for, really, is to force that. Now, it doesn't work in other countries where those practices are acceptable. In other countries, there are some foreign governments, such as South Africa, who have a fantastic restitution process. They actually say to the criminals that if you don't pay the money back, you're facing 15 years in prison. So they do it instead of me doing it. So South Africa is probably some of the best restitution laws on the planet when it comes to recovering money for victims. Some countries are very favourable to the victim. Other countries, like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, these Southeast Asian countries are not favourable at all to the victim. They're favourable towards the criminal. So the only process you have in these countries is the criminal process. But if you kick their doors in with a police team and you arrest them and they're locked up, your bargaining power then becomes quite significant. And most of them have the money to pay. So we've used this type of leverage against some of these criminal groups very effectively. In other cases, we've won civil proceedings and got judgments and taken the money through court orders. But it does work. But the problem is it's costly. So you have to have those budgets. Someone's got to fork out that money to engage someone like us, because there's a lot of work involved. And we're doing the criminal briefs of evidence. We're putting it all together and we're handing it to the police so that they review it and just go out and apply for the search warrants.
Yeah, you're not a recovery as a service company where you pay us $100, we'll get you your $1,000 back.
No, it's a different level.
Several orders of magnitude above that, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're quite unique in the sense that we've done a lot of these cases, and some of them have been highly successful. We tend to take media with us these days because we like to publish our cases. We like to expose the scammers. We like to expose how the scams work so that we can warn the general public. One of our cases, Busted, with 60 Minutes Australia, won the Kennedy Media Award in 2019 for the most outstanding current affairs story of the year. So these are very interesting stories. We got $530,000 back in that case. We froze within 2 minutes of kicking the doors in of their office. We were at their finance department looking at their bank account details, and we had that account frozen in Australia immediately by the bank. So the only way to get recovery from these people is to take the fight to them. And that's what we do.
And hopefully that will, as you guys master the process, that sort of will trickle down to non-high wealth individuals and and large companies, but down to where it be accessible to other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, look, I wish we could do more for the little people, the ones that have lost, still a lot of money, maybe $100,000. People that have lost their superannuation, their life savings. Yeah. And it is a devastating crime. I don't think people realise the effect of financial crime on the victim. It's so devastating. It's the worst type of crime because when you lose your financial freedom, your ability to retire happily or buy a holiday home, or when you lose all of that work that you've done all those years, it has a certain emotional effect on you. And it leaves you in ruin, in absolute ruin. And I think it's one of the most devastating crimes against humanity. To steal someone's livelihood is robbing them of their dreams. It's taking away their ability to support their family. It's taking all those fundamental rights away from that person who has worked possibly for 30 years to build up some sort of financial freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And some will say, oh, well, they deserve it because they're greedy or they're this or they're that. But, that's not actually true. A lot of these victims that I deal with, they didn't want to invest. They were the only reason they invested is because they wanted to do the best for their son or their daughter, or they wanted to put their daughter through college. So they decided to take a risk because they really wanted to see their children go to a private school or have a better education. Or a lot of the reasons these people are investing is to help other people.
Yeah.
It's not even for themselves. So it's not a true statement to say that the victim's greedy and so forth. There's this, sort of wrong impression, I guess, of all the victims. There are certainly victims that are greedy and the ones that have been silly in a way, irresponsible by not doing due diligence and so forth. But the majority of these victims are normal people, mums and dads of the United States or of Australia or Canada or other countries that are just battling and they want to make a difference.
Yeah.
So they decide to invest. They come across something that looks like, a deal of a lifetime, and they are eventually robbed of all their dreams. And on the flip side of that, I've sat with criminals in the Philippines. I've sat with people. Initially, I used to do some undercover work in the Philippines where I would go to the bars and drink with some of these guys that were working. And I'll never forget one day a guy from Florida, an American, a young man working in a boiler room. He was quite drunk. He broke down in tears. He started crying because he was telling me how he works for this organisation. And he said his words were, I'm robbing the dreams of people, and I feel really bad about it. And this was coming from a kind of a seasoned professional con man. So these people do have a conscience. They know what they're doing is a horrible crime, and they know the devastating effect that it has. And at the end of the day, these criminals have to carry that on their conscience for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I suppose they're just greedy investors is the way to cover their own, assuage their own guilt.
That's correct, and that's part of the training. It's justification. We can justify what we're doing because these investors have got more money than sense. Like you said earlier on, they're wealthy American businessman. He's so bored. He's sitting on his 60-foot yacht down in Florida with nothing to do. So he decides to do a bit of crypto trading. The way they see it is they are well and truly justified with targeting a victim like that. In their own minds, they are justified because they think, well, this guy can afford to lose it. And that's just the justification that these criminals play over in their mind over and over again.
In order to help them sleep at night.
Absolutely. And it's all part of their training.
So as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you, so you've been a private investigator for 33 years and working with cybercrime. Have you ever fallen victim to a scam or cybercrime yourself?
No, I haven't. I haven't ever been a victim of anything online. Not that I'm aware of, but I've always been cautious. I don't really buy online. I'm not one of these people that shop online. I guess I'm very cautious about doing anything online. So I can proudly say that I have never fallen victim to anything on the internet. No, and I hope I never do. And as I said, I've had certainly enough experience to know what sort of things to look for, and I would hope that I never will. I'm a bit concerned about my son. One of my sons at the moment is dabbling in cryptocurrency, and I keep telling him to be very, very cautious. But he's convinced me that he knows what he's doing, and I just have that horrible feeling that one of these days he's going to come and, hey, Dad, I just lost my $750, which I've been saving. He's investing in a crypto mining company at the moment. He's mining his own crypto, So, look, it's a fantastic thing, cryptocurrency. It's exciting, but boy, you have to be very, very cautious about what you do with it and how you deal with it, and certainly do your homework and do your research before engaging with anybody that claims they can make you wealthy.
Yeah, that's always a red flag. I can make you fabulously wealthy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how the scams have morphed from the old days of when there used to be facsimiles sent to people with certain offers or even letters. Back in the old Nigerian prince days,
Yep.
they would send out an actual letter in an envelope, and then that person would respond, and they would go on for weeks and months. Well, now that same scam is still happening, but it's exponential in the speed
Yeah.
of what things now. It all happens within a matter of hours. Sometimes, the victim can fall within a matter of hours.
And that's one of the things that, like, I always warn people about. If things are moving fast, whether it's financial, romance, like,
Yeah,
wave
yeah,
your hands in the air. It's red flags. So I kind of think back to those days when those were happening via postal mail and faxes of like, well, you've got lots of time to let the emotions wear down on these. Like, how did you fall for it? Like, I
absolutely.
understand it now when people are, you're in the moment and it's a real time exchange. But when you had to put a letter in the mail and wait 2 weeks for a response.
Absolutely. And look, if anybody's investing or thinking of investing, they just need to take a step back. They need to talk to somebody, even a member of their family. They need to talk to somebody else about what they're thinking of doing. Get a second opinion, and get reach out, have a look at this website, have a look at the trading platform. If it's unregulated, don't go near it, because the unregulated platforms are almost exclusively run by large criminal organisations, and that money never ever comes out. It goes in, but never comes out. And so those simple due diligence steps, it can save an enormous amount of grief, enormous amount of money, enormous amount of heartache, and save you from financial ruin by some very simple steps. Taking a deep breath, and having a think about what you're about to do, and really maybe turn to somebody that does know a little bit about websites, to just do some due diligence and checks. And before long, you're going to find those red flags, and you've possibly saved yourself from an enormous amount of grief.
That's great advice. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Our website, www.ifwglobal.com. So IFW Global has a website. Obviously, there's an inquiry form there. If anybody has any questions or any advice about scams, or if someone has lost their money, and they want to find out what recovery options are available, we're more than happy to help them.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes. Ken,
Fantastic.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Chris. It's really great to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If you found anything in this episode helpful, please share this episode with someone you know and leave a review at easyprey.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Ken Gamble can be found at easyprey.com/86.